Hi, I'm Mike Reynolds, senior reporter covering the media industry with S&P Global Market Intelligence Tech, Media, and Telecom News Team. Welcome to MediaTalk, a podcast hosted by S&P Global, where the news and research staff explore issues in the evolving media landscape. Today, I'm joined by a trio of S&P Global analysts. Principal analyst Justin Nielsen, who specializes in broadcast, among other areas. Principal analyst Scott Robson, who tracks U.S. TV networks and sports. And research analyst Michael Johnson, who's on U.S. Sports Watch. Michael is making his MediaTalk debut. Today, we're going to talk about the 24-25 college football season, which has a number of major changes with conference realignments and will culminate with an expanded college football playoff. Let's start with our freshman. Michael, how excited are you that week 0 is finally upon us?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. Very excited and definitely ecstatic that we now get meaningful football every weekend for the rest of the year.
Scott, are you ready to roll with college football?
Yes, Mike, very much looking forward to the season this year. There's nothing like college football.
And Justin, how will college football be like for you, given the reshuffled, reduced, reconstituted Pac-12? Sadly, it's down to 2 teams.
Yes, sadly, the Pac-2 or the 2-pack with Washington State and Oregon State will essentially be independents that have to schedule with the Mountain West Conference team to fill out their schedules. The good news is the rivalry games will remain among the exiting teams with the Apple Cup with UW and Washington State and the Civil War with Oregon and Oregon State. I'm personally getting used to the idea of my alma mater, Arizona State, being part of the Big 12, or is it 16?
Yeah.
Regionality of major conferences is gone now, but the new realignment shakes things up a bit and should produce some compelling games this year. There's 9 ranked teams in the SEC this year. That's going to be a bloodbath. Fortunately, there's an expanded 12-team playoffs this season, and I'm not sure if any of those teams are going to go undefeated.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Mike, can you talk about the Big Ten, which is now 30 teams? There's an LA division of sorts, if you will.
Yeah, so the Big Ten is adding 4 schools to the conference for this season. Oregon, UCLA, USC, and Washington are moving from the former Pac-12. The conference is now spanning from coast to coast with marquee games every week as they enter the second year of their historic 7-year, $8 billion rights deal with Fox, Paramount, and NBC.
Scott, you live in Austin, Texas. As of right now, that's SEC country. Can you talk about the SEC? There's a couple of major newcomers with strong collegiate football traditions coming to the conference.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm living in Austin. Very much looking forward to some big SEC action this year. Texas made the 4-team playoff last year and nearly the championship game. So I expect them to have another great season with their quarterback coming back. I think the team is ranked 4th going into the season. They've got a great home game against the number 1 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, which should be a good one. Of course, Oklahoma is also in the SEC now. So the annual Red River Showdown between Texas and Oklahoma rolls on. Just really a great rivalry, steeped in tradition. Great pageantry for that event from both schools. So glad to see that continue. I expect the SEC to have another big year.
Justin, let's go to the Big 12. As noted, Texas and Oklahoma are out. Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and your Arizona State's Sun Devils are in. There's a new contract, but it's not till next season. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the new contract will kick in with ESPN and Fox for the 25-26 football season and add a substantial 90% increase from $200 million this year to $300 million next year through 2031. And that's interesting since it was essentially a rights deal that the Pac-12 scoffed at, thinking they should be at the level of the SEC and Big Ten before its implosion.
Let's go ACC. Some major changes there, Michael, and maybe more afoot. Also, ESPN is the ACC king, but the CW also has a package in there.
Yeah, so the ACC, they're in the midst of their 20-year, $4.8 billion media rights agreement with ESPN, going all the way until 2036. When it was signed in 2016, it seemed advantageous, providing stable income for multiple decades for all the schools. But with all of the realignment and the conference adding 3 more schools this year, some members, I think, believe they can secure greater earnings elsewhere. And that's where Clemson and Florida State have made their intentions clear that they might try and leave the ACC before the current media deal expires in 12 years from now.
So a judge is going to play some key roles there, that's for sure. Justin, how about the main independent of college football, Notre Dame? Again, they can continue their run on NBC. Games are on Peacock. ND is a member of the ACC in most sports. Their football schedule, though, has them playing a number of ACC teams in football. So what's your sensibility for Notre Dame?
NBC with Notre Dame has a long relationship where Peacock, with the new streaming option, is a new wrinkle to this. And with Stanford being part of the ACC now, you'll continue that traditional matchup. And Notre Dame USC as part of the Big Ten. Yeah, those legacy games are still part of their schedule, but in different conferences.
All right. Scott, let's talk a little bit more about streaming. ESPN Plus has a ton of games, but typically it's not the marquee matchups. Fox's focus has been on traditional linear business, but in terms of the expanded college football playoff schedule, Warner Brothers Discovery will stream a couple of games at sub-licensing on Max. I think that's right, Scott, but none of the CFP games on ESPN will be on ESPN Plus. I'm a little confused there.
Yeah, so the industry, as it transitions from linear to streaming, we're still in a place where I think top tier college football games are best suited for national broadcast television. But as streaming services continue to expand their live sports portfolios, fans are going to be able to watch more games this year, which is going to be good for the sport. I just looked at the lineup for ESPN Plus, and it's quite extensive. Peacock will have 9 exclusive Big Ten college football games this year that won't be shown on the NBC broadcast network. They had some success with the NFL wildcard matchup last year, so I think Peacock can ride the momentum from the Olympics into the fall with some of the exclusive games. And then with the college football playoff, I think that really opens up a lot of new opportunities for networks and streaming services to air some big events. TNT Sports has bought 2 first-round playoff games from ESPN, which will be streamed on Max via the Bleacher Report add-on. I think the games on ESPN will be on the linear network and not be available through ESPN Plus. But Disney is launching a more complete ESPN direct-to-consumer service next year that will stream the college football playoff games. But this current version still won't have everything that you see on ESPN.
Yeah, okay, that makes some sense. Talking about ESPN and Disney, along with Fox and Warner Bros. Discovery, they were trying to put together a sports-oriented streaming joint venture called Venu. Its launch and its future has been thrown into discord by a judge, which was granted a temporary injunction after Fubo filed a suit. Justin, your sense for that? And even if it had gone off, I guess in terms of this, ESPN and Fox have a lot of football. So Venu would have been a nice package for college football fans.
Yeah, definitely for college football. And I was a bit surprised with the court injunction against Venu occurring right before the kind of college football and NFL season launch date. It's being appealed by the 3 joint partners, but it's a big win for Fubo. Its stock jumped 17%, which was about halved prior to that. And by extension, the virtual multi-channel services like DirecTV and YouTube TV and others have been advertising extensively around the college football season with DirecTV stream or no dish service ahead of the football season. I even saw Coach Prime make an appearance as one of the pigeons in one of the commercials.
Okay, here we go. That's one to say for sure. Michael, let's talk about the CFP expanded playoffs, 12 teams this year, more interest, saturation. I think 14 or 16 of the numbers are talking about in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the 12-team format will prove to be a sweet spot for fans of the college football this season, providing 11 high-level matchups throughout the holiday season and beyond a little bit into the new year. So ESPN holds the college football playoff rights now until the 2032, following their $7.8 billion extension announced earlier this year. We'll see over the next year if growth discussions take place before the extended deal begins in 2026. I could definitely see a scenario where the playoff expands to, as you mentioned, possibly as many teams as 16. And anything is possible when billions of dollars are being discussed. So
we'll see. Scott, I guess you had mentioned this earlier. Warner Bros. Discovery's in the mix. They've sub-licensed a couple of the CFP games from ESPN. Is this a play to fill in a bit for the presumed loss of their NBA rights?
Yeah, so I think that, what we've seen is TNT has been scooping up a bunch of additional sports rights to try and fill the gap that's going to be potentially left by the absence of the NBA next year. I think these college football playoff games are going to attract large audiences, which will be good for ratings. but apparently ESPN gets to keep all the advertising revenue generated from the games, which is an odd situation. It does make TNT more valuable to page TV operators, which might help keep the license fee from crashing in a post-NBA world. And TNT has also acquired the rights to the Mountain West. So we're looking at 14 Mountain West games on True TV and Max this season. Now, True TV has been rebranded this year to include more sports content. So I think the addition of the Mountain West games is a good move, especially when thinking about True TV's involvement in the Venu streaming service.
Yeah, no, they've definitely been taking a lot of steps to add in some different properties. So we'll see how that goes in the years ahead. The two sub-license games that TNT will have from the college football playoffs perhaps have the misfortune of going up against two NFL games, Chiefs and Texans and Pittsburgh and Baltimore on that late Saturday in December. A tough road to start that way, don't you think?
It is, and it's a risk for Warner Brothers Discovery and TNT. Although there's slightly different audiences for college football compared with NFL. However, in Texas, you may have to have two TVs or split screen if it's the Texans and the Longhorn on the same day. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Let's talk a little bit about viewership, guys. Big Noon has been booming for Fox, Big Ten now in a broader state in a bi-coastal league. Michael, your sense for viewership this season?
Yeah, I think the Big Noon kickoff will continue to explode as far as viewership goes. For the first 3 weeks of the season, they have 3 marquee games. Penn State traveling to Morgantown. I think it's Big Noon's first trip to Morgantown, West Virginia, so everybody will be excited there. Followed by in week 2, Michigan and Texas square off. And then Alabama takes a trip up to Wisconsin in week 3 to begin the season. Yeah, I expect following those 3 marquee games, viewership just continue to explode throughout the season, culminating with the game in late November between Ohio State and Michigan.
Yeah, that's what we all look forward to every year. And that's quite a nice way to start the season for those guys. Scott, SEC is full throttle now on the Disney ESPN platforms, including that 3:30 p.m. Eastern game that used to be the hallmark of CBS's college football. Big audience expected for the SEC this time around?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of competition for eyeballs during the 3:30 Eastern slot this season. Like you said, ESPN and ABC will have the SEC, then CBS will have the Big Ten, and at 3:30, NBC will have Notre Dame. So CBS and NBC each betting on the Big Ten, and having some of those games go head to head with the SEC on ESPN should be pretty interesting. I think that Disney is paying a little bit less for the SEC package than NBC and CBS are paying for the Big Ten. So given that, I think CBS is banking on drawing a larger audience for the Big Ten than they were with the SEC.
Justin, you had some thoughts about how viewership might be a little bit different given all the realignment this year?
I would say so. And there are positives in terms of viewership from some of the recent conference realignments. So now you have teams like Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC in the Big Ten in the midday Saturday matchups like USC and Michigan. But you're not going to get those evening hour type of games like the Pac-12 networks where it dropped off, or where you had some core matchups of Pac-12 teams that were just not getting the national viewership. And then on the Big 12 side, you've got those late night games, those 7:30 Pacific time games on ESPN. So it kind of takes the place of Pac-12 after dark games. But more broadly, I think there will be more high-profile games that will get a national audience across both the daytime and evening hours.
All right. Michael, you just did a preview wrap story on the college football season. You guys have all talked about today how much the rights fees are coming to the various conferences. What's the collective rights fee for the Big Four conferences this season, Michael? Can you put a number on that for us?
Yeah, so the Power Four conferences, they hold media rights deals for, I believe, over $20 billion until at least 2030, with the Big Ten leading the way and average annual value of, I believe it's $1.15 billion per season, followed by the SEC, $710 million on an annual average value.
Yep. And then as Justin talked about, Big 12 is going to get a little bit bigger, and we'll see what happens with ACC, especially if Clemson and Florida State go elsewhere. Anyway, getting to the end here, guys. Our favorite college football squads. How will we do? Michael, who are we looking at here?
Yeah, so I grew up a big Ohio State fan. I expect them to be in the mix as far as the college football playoff, absolutely, and making a run at the national title this year.
All right. Scott, how are you down in Austin? Are you T man all the way now?
Yeah, I'll be rooting for Texas this year, and I think they have a good shot of competing for a title again, given that the quarterback's coming back, a lot of good players coming back. I love going to the games, taking an electric scooter up Congress Ave to the stadium, just way better than being stuck in traffic on the way to an NFL.
Absolutely. Okay. Justin, what are the Sun Devils of Arizona State going to look like for us this year?
It'll be interesting. A young team on the upswing, second-year head coach. But yeah, ASU was way behind the curve on NIL. So hopefully it'll take them a few years. And always beating U of A in the final game is definitely the icing on the cake. Yeah.
Okay. All right. My son went to LSU, so it's the Tigers for me. Awful defense last year. Their three top guys, including Heisman Trophy winner Jaden Daniels, they're now all in the NFL. So the offense is going to be not as good. Hopefully the defense will be a little bit better. I'm thinking 8 wins, hoping for 9. We'll see. Anyway, under the new college football playoff format this season, the 5 highest ranked conference champions, and there were 7 at-large bids. So the SEC and Big Ten champions are in. How many of the 7 at-large bids will go to those 2 super conferences collectively? Michael, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that the power conferences this year will be well represented with those at-large bids. They will most likely beat up on each other throughout the year, but their play will prove to the world that they belong in those at-large bids. So I expect all of them to be power conference.
Justin, your thoughts?
I would say so. I'm really excited about the Big 12 just because I think there's a lot of teams that are very matched together. So I'm hopeful that one of those teams rises to the top, maybe Utah and maybe a Kansas. Who knows?
Interesting. Scott, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the SEC could have about 5 teams make the playoffs. Big Ten have another 3 or 4. So maybe 8 of the 12 teams belonging to those 2 major conferences if everything goes right for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm going to say 4 to 5 of the at-large berths go to the combination of the SEC and Big Ten. So again, we'll have to wait till December, January to figure that out. All right. Who's the national champion? Scott.
Yeah, I think Oregon has a good shot this year. Lots of offensive firepower, new quarterback in Gabriel coming over from Oklahoma. So it might be the year for the Ducks.
Justin.
I think I'm going to go with Ohio State, just the revenge tour after losing to Michigan.
All right. I'm going to say the same thing and call it the Ohio State. And Michael, given your allegiance, are you going to say the same thing?
No, I'm going to be boring and to go with the Georgia Bulldogs winning it all, led by Carson Beck, making a run for the number 1 pick in the draft.
All right. There you have it. Definitive selections. That concludes this episode of Media Talk. I wanted to say thanks to Justin, Scott, and Michael for sharing their thoughts on college football and having some fun. Thanks, guys. This is Mike Reynolds. Thanks to all of you for listening. We'll catch up soon on the next edition of Media Talk.